Hi, guys. I
Hello,
hope
good
you
evening.
guys are doing well.
Yes.
Good to see you, Daryl.
Yeah, I meant to speak to you last week at St. Simon's,
Uh-huh.
and because I re remembered your voice, and
I
I don't know if we were in a workshop together.
don't
Uh,
know if we were, but we were certainly, in worship and all those other places. Oh, you sat right next to me in the,
Immigration, maybe?
yeah, it wasn't immigration, it was the advocacy conversation. Is that
Okay.
right? Nice. That was a very good weekend.
Yeah, it was.
I came home with a lot to think about and add into the mix.
Yes, yeah,
Daryl,
definitely.
what's your role at your church?
I am chairman. I'm an elder chairman of the trustees,
Oh, okay.
and and that's pretty much it. I was on the session, and I got off that when I got really involved with Flint River,
Mm-hmm.
um, as it with Flint River, I was on the advisory board and now the Senate commissioner. So
Oh, you're going to have an interesting year, aren't you?
that's what I hear.
Oh, well, thank you for going and representing.
Hmm.
And are you retired, Daryl?
Not quite.
Still,
I,
so balancing job and all that too. Wow.
right, right.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, Samia, I see you there.
I see
Hello,
Andy there.
Hello.
hey
And
y'all.
Andy. And who's got the red scarf on?
Joyce, Joyce
Joyce.
Dejoie, yeah, from Northeast Georgia.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And Joyce, you're at
Bell Terrace.
yes, and you were part of our welcoming team last at St. Simon's, and you did such a beautiful job.
Well, thank you for saying so.
No,
It was a wonderful event, and I'm sure hoping that we will have another. Right,
you got,
Andy?
yeah, agreed. I mean, we've got three members of the planning team here. So Daryl, Joyce, and I
Yeah,
were all on that. So yeah,
right.
yeah.
Wonderful.
Now we
Wonderful.
just got to find out when we can meet again so we can talk about doing it again.
Whew. Well,
There is no such
take a
thing as a
breath.
good meeting date, it seems.
Take a breath, wait till after Easter. Oh, Andy, you
It's
okay?
normal. Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. All right.
Uh, okay.
Well, we have one other small church pastor with us. He's doing the dishes here.
Yeah.
So he's listening in, but he'll be over here as soon as he finishes his work.
You meant to say baptizing the dishes, right?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Baptizing the dishes.
Never
Yes.
thought of it quite like that, but I guess it
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah. So, Daryl, tell me what church you're in at.
Carver Heights Presbyterian in Columbus, Georgia.
Okay. Thank you. And Samia, what's your role at your church?
I'm on the outreach committee.
Thank you. I'm
Um, uh,
taking notes this time so I can remember.
Yeah,
there isn't a test at the end, right?
No, no, no. I just don't want to keep asking you over and over again the same things.
No, no, it's all right. And since we're talking, I just want to tell you how helpful this series has been to me over the months. I I come up with one-liners that just stick so deep. So on the outreach committee, there's a lot of outreach you're doing too. And one line sticks in my mind all the time. God does not require us to be successful, but to be faithful. And this comes back to me every time I do so much work and we do so much, and then we think, well, the outcome wasn't as we expect. And I think God just wants us to be faithful. The fruits are His, the results are His.
Amen.
Well,
Yes.
yeah. So, and I learned this from this small group, and I learned little things that just keep me going, keep me running the race without being tired.
Oh, thank you
Hmm.
for saying that. And that
Yeah.
affirmation keeps me going. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, keep going, please.
All right. Super, super. And is it Vinod? Vinod? Yes, I got it right. Super. And Vinod, what's your role at your church?
So I'm the solo pastor of Holy
Okay.
Trinity Presbyterian Church. It is in Fort Myers, southwestern part of Florida.
Okay. So let's see. I think we have all the three states represented then. And did you say Fort Myers?
Yes, North Fort Myers.
Not Fort Myers.
North Fort
North.
North
Myers.
Oh,
Fort
okay.
Myers.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
A-
Super.
And you said you're a pastor?
Yes,
You look very young. Oh my goodness.
I am very young. Thanks. I take it as a compliment.
Ooh.
Uh, and Samia, what's your church?
Bayshore Presbyterian in Tampa.
Oh,
Bayshore
Hmm.
Presbyterian Church in Tampa, Florida.
Okay.
Oh,
Super duper. All right. Well, Andy, I've gotten everybody to introduce themselves now. So it's your turn to tell us who you are.
You've just taken the first thing off my outline,
Oh,
which is no,
uh-oh.
that's totally fine. It's totally fine. That's why we're here. So my name is Andy James. I serve as stated clerk of the Presbytery of Greater Atlanta. I've been in this role for just under 4 years. But and if you know much about the Presbytery of Greater Atlanta, we are not a small church presbytery in general. The largest church in the PCUSA is Peachtree Presbyterian Church, which is a member of the Presbytery of Greater Atlanta. So I work with big churches a lot. Uh, but in a previous life, before I took this role, I served as Associate for Small Church Ministries and Technology in New Hope Presbytery in Eastern North Carolina. And I served as a small church pastor in Queens, New York City. So of a congregation of about 45 members. So I have a special place in my heart for the work of small churches, and I always will. And so when a small church clerk of session calls me up and says, "Help, I need help with my statistical reports," or "What do I do with my session minutes?" or all of those things, I drop what I'm doing and make sure that the small church clerk or pastor or whatever gets a little bit of extra attention because I will always have a special place for the good work that happens in small churches. So, um, so thank you for the invitation, Caroline. It's really been fun to think a little bit about this, and I hope this is a helpful conversation. I'm gonna kind of talk through some reflections I've had about things that work well with our Presbyterian polity in small churches and some things that maybe don't work so well and maybe some ideas we about how we can do that better. Um, I'm going to start by saying that I really think that Presbyterian polity in the way we have it right now, on the whole, with a few exceptions, is the most appropriate and flexible option for small churches. I think we're in a really this polity makes it possible to do some things and that in big churches and in small churches. It's not one size fits all, but it really is that kind of one size fits most because there's so many things we can do to make it work better. Um, so want to tell you a few things that I think really work well in small churches that I've seen over the years. And first of all, and I'll pause for questions after each one of these, and also really kind of want to hear from you about what's worked well for your work. First of all, I think one of the things that works really well for small churches is the way we approach pastoral relationships. Um, Now, some people would say, that's not, how can that be? It's so hard to get an installed pastor. But in this day, and that's very true. But in this day and age, so much of our pastoral ministry is done in very productive ways by pastors who are in temporary relationships. It's got different names in different presbyteries. Some people call it stated supply. Some people call it, we call it in Atlanta contract call, various words. But these temporary relationships give churches the flexibility to do things that work for them and for the leaders who they believe are best suited to serve them. There aren't broad requirements for hours and compensation and benefits. Some presbyteries have them, but they're not, they're usually a step below installed pastors. In Greater Atlanta, we do not require, for example, our contract call pastors to be on full benefits package. They need just a subset of benefits. Um, and you can have those relationships that are short, that are very part-time. I sometimes refer to them as a Sunday plus relationship. Somebody who shows up on Sunday and maybe moderates session meetings, maybe will certainly do funerals, do some pastoral care, and just kind of be a good guiding presence for a church. And that is huge. My experience has been that the most important thing a small church can do is have consistent pastoral leadership. And temporary pastoral relationships make that possible in small churches. Another way that that happens very well under the Book of Order in our polity is um, using commissioned pastors or commissioned ruling elders, depending on how your presbytery defines it. Um, these are possibilities for people who are a little bit different, who step in who maybe haven't been able to finish a graduate degree or something like that, to um, to step into leadership in a congregational setting. Um, it means that people can bring different backgrounds of their leadership to the church. So, imagine an engineer talking about the gospel on Sunday morning as their sermon and bringing that mindset to the life of a congregation. And leaders can come more directly from the community that they serve. There's just more flexibility for commission pastors, commission ruling elders in our churches. And I think this is really one of the most important things that are out there for small churches. Because you can kind of do whatever you want. You can create whatever works for you. Um, you know, I've heard of settings where very much within the polity, there is a pastor who is responsible for 3 or 4 churches, and they've got 2 or 3 commission ruling elders who serve around in those and step in and do the main pastoral care and the regular Sunday preaching with a little bit of supervision, and then they get that wisdom from that. The churches also get that wisdom from that pastor who kind of sits over them, not in an authoritative way, but in a way of collaboration and building up the whole. And so I think it's an under-recognized way that our polity opens us to different kinds of leadership. Another another polity point related to that is one that we've done several times here in Greater Atlanta, and I get the privilege of doing the training for it, which is our training for ruling elders to serve communion. Presbyteries can authorize specific ruling elders to serve communion in congregations, even without a full commission ruling elder status. So in Greater Atlanta, we have about a 1.5 hour training session that I lead with them to talk about what does communion mean? How do we work our way through the sacrament of the Lord's Supper? What do we do in worship? And usually get to conclude that training with actually standing behind the table and saying some of the words and getting them in your lips and maybe even breaking the bread and sharing communion together in that time. So I think that's another great way that our polity opens us to some other possibilities. Um, some small churches need some real flexibility, and one of them that I think is that I'm always a little surprised that we don't get more requests for it at the presbytery level is the Book of Orders permission for a waiver on the limitation of terms for ruling elders on session.
Mhm.
Um, normally the ruling elders can only serve 6 consecutive years and they have to take a year off. And small churches, are always trying to do this beautiful puzzle to figure out how do you get that person, how do you put the right group of people together so you've got 6 years in it. And quite honestly, I tell them, ask for the waiver. Come to us and say, we need a year or two to hit reset on this. It's okay. Um, it's not a weakness in your life together. Asking for help in this way is actually a joy. It is a way that we can find new understandings of what it means to be church together. You can, but alongside this, there are some other things that don't always click in people's brains. Session terms can be shorter than 3 years. I know churches that have sessions of where they have 2 year terms because that just works better. They can get more people to commit. They might still serve 6 years, but it's easier to get them to commit for 2 years at a time rather than 3 years at a time.
Mhm.
Um, and you don't have to have a certain number. Like the Book of Order does not say the minimum number of elders on session. Now, let me be really clear. You need Once you drop below about three, you usually are setting yourself up for some real challenges. But that those people who are like, oh, we can't find that sixth person, take a breath. The polity will survive if you have 5 people on session this year. Um, those questions you laugh, but I get these questions with surprising frequency. Like, how many can we do? Can we really? Yes, you can really take that year off. The last thing I want to mention that popped in my head, and I was scrambling at 6:58 to look this up, make sure I could at least have my notes where it came from. But it hit me one of the things that there actually is even a Robert's rules point that I would say is helpful for small churches. And it is what is called the small board rule or small board rules. Th this is written in Robert's rules as um, a way that it is by default in place for a board or committee of about a dozen or less. In a small church, that's almost all your session's almost always less than 12 people. So, in small board rules, the process is simpler. There are two things in particular that come up in small board rules. The first one, I if I don't even practice this one when I moderate sessions because it will blow people's mind and they just don't understand they can't understand it. I Under small board rules, a motion does not need a second.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm looking at your faces, and yeah, there's a little bit of shock there. You do not need a second to a motion when you've got a small group of people. I've been in small board meetings and such where when someone seconds the motion, it's as if it's approved. Um, I had to. I had to I ended up being president of a nonprofit board a few years back, and um that was one of the I kind of even before I was a member of it, and I was kind of like a couple times like, excuse me, we actually need to vote on that before we move on. Yes, it was moved and seconded, but we need a vote before we actually go forward.
Yeah.
Um, the other big small board rule that I'll mention is what you probably do anyway in a session meeting. And that is, and there are some others to these, but this, I hope this gives you some permission. Um, you can have a discussion about a topic without a motion there. Technically, under Robert's rules, you can't talk about anything till you have a motion. But in almost every session meeting I've ever been a part of, there is, somebody says, okay, we've got the hot water heater is broken. What are we going to do about the hot water heater? And we talk about the hot water heater. And then somebody finally says, I move that we call Joe's Plumbing uh, and authorize up to $2,000 to replace the hot water heater. Second, any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? We're going to go buy a new hot water heater. Call Joe tomorrow. Um, that's not how Robert's rules is supposed to function, but it's exactly how it's supposed to function in a small board. So, so just, and I say that as well to say our polity encourages and allows us to be as relaxed as we need to be in what we do. We don't have to get stuck in a very specific way of doing it. We can be open to doing it simpler, more faithfully, more hopefully in all of these things. So I'm going to pause there because we're going to turn to some things that I think don't always work well. But any questions on what I've shared so far? Any other places you've
Uh,
seen the polity work really well to support small church?
Andy, Andy, I have lots of questions because some of this stuff is so new to me. I'm sorry,
Okay,
I'm just a
that's
little
fine.
ignorant about the polity. So,
Sure.
what the commission ruling elders,
Hmm.
are these elders that belong to the church or they don't belong to the church? Commission means I can get them from the community and commission them for 3 years and then they can leave.
It really kind of depends on the presbytery. So, but to be a commissioned ruling elder, you have to be ordained as a ruling elder to serve somewhere. But you can then be called and commissioned to serve by the presbytery to serve in a particular setting in pastoral service. So it could be, I know commissioned ruling elders who've served as associate pastors in medium-sized churches. This is especially common. The particular circumstance that comes to my mind is a CRE. I'll throw the acronym out there. A CRE who spoke Spanish, and so kind of began to cultivate a Spanish ministry in the congregation, even
Mhm.
as they continued their main ministry in English. But another setting would be that this ruling elder is commissioned to serve as pastor of a smaller congregation, to be a full pastor in that setting, to have all of the duties and responsibilities to preside at communion and to administer the sacrament of baptism. Um, and there are you can say in the commission what the person is able to do, but you can do pretty much anything that a minister can do in that one congregational setting.
And
So there's no,
that would be I'm sorry, that's also moderating the session.
It could include moderating the session. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The list of things is in G G-2.10. Kind of there are four paragraphs in there that kind of walk through what can happen there.
it takes me to the next one, which is
Hmm.
a little bit related. So elders train to serve communion.
Hmm.
Now, there are no qualifications? They don't have to have gone through, I mean, they're elders,
They
but
have to be trained by the presbytery to serve communion and
right.
approved to do it. Yes.
All right. And how do we go about it? Like their church would send a request to say, I want these people to, so that let's say a pastor is sick one Sunday, they can step in. Is
So
this
yeah, the
similar?
the way to do that would be, and this happens a lot in more in super rural churches. If they, the places we've trained, we actually have one that's in town. I'll say more on that in a second. But um, the super rural churches that they can't always find an ordained minister to be there on the first Sunday of the month or whenever they like to have communion. So the church reached out to the presbytery, to their contact on staff or on the Commission on Ministry or whatever committee they relate to, and said, we'd like to do this. And worked with us to set up that training time. If your presbytery has never done that before, feel free to tell them um, that I would be glad to share my outline of the training with them. So we don't. I will say we don't like. I would say I would send you a recording of my training. We don't do that training online. That feels like something that we really need to do in person together.
Um, Andy, I was intrigued when you were talking about the commissioned ruling elders. I think we so much start with like this is supposed to be the model, right?
Hmm.
And if if you choose something else, it's somewhat lesser. And so I long for a time when a church might say, you know, really the ideal thing for us is this person who can live in our community, who either and I don't know. I'd be curious your question, your insight on whether it's a good idea for that person, that commission ruling elder, to have been a member of the church, which I think Samia was mentioning, or if it is it better that that person comes from
Mm.
outside and serves at that church.
It
Um,
really kind of varies
mhm.
um, on that. I've seen it work well both ways. I've seen it not work well both ways. So I don't think it's really so it's really a lot about the individual and the congregation and to to think I think the key piece to think about whether when you're using somebody from within the congregation, what is going to be different on the other when they complete this moment of service, and there because it's not going to be forever. Um, not that they, not that we are assuming that it's not going to be forever. I mean, it can only be approved for up to 3 years, but there is this. But what is that person? How does that person reintegrate into being just a member again? Um, are they of the character and personality that where that's going to come easily to them? Or are they always going to be someone who is standing, whoever the next leader is going to stand in their shadow? So, and there's nothing wrong with that, with being that kind of leader. It's just a reality. To let's make sure that we are conscious and aware of the kinds of leaders we're going to be. Because there's not a better or worse. It's just that awareness.
So,
And I think that gets to your other point of like CREs aren't for everybody, but or called and installed pastor is not for everybody either anymore.
Mhm. So Andy, are you saying all this is covered in the Book of Order?
Everything I've said, except for Robert's rules piece, is in the Book of Order, and I can give
Okay.
you citations for it if you need to go to it. And I will say the challenge, and we'll talk a little more about this at the end. But the challenge is often helping people see that there are options in the Book of Order
Hmm.
that they haven't
Right.
imagined before.
Okay.
If possible at all, if you can put all of this in a document and then maybe Carolyn can send it to us so we can have access. If I need something to bring
Absolutely. I
something
can.
to the church, I say, hey, I attended this, and this is the information from the book, just because it really does facilitate things. I can tell you, we just had a discussion on a member from the session who needed to leave and we couldn't replace. And we said, all right, and he can sit 1 year. And it was just a,
Yep.
a bit of a difficulty there. So if you
I will. I have my notes here, and that are some. They've got some handwritten, not stuff on the edges, but I will translate. I'll get it all typed up and in the next couple days and get it to Caroline. So
Super. And the Synod sends out after every one of these meetings that we send out the recording of the meeting and we send out the AI summary and any other, resources you have to
okay,
share. So
great. Okay,
great,
yeah, I'll try to get that to you sooner rather than later.
great.
Great. Any other comments, questions on things that are supportive and helpful in our polity for small churches? Well, let me move on a little bit to talk about the places where we sometimes have not been as helpful. The thing, a couple of places that seem to be ongoing sticking points, and this is just kind of what I've seen over the years, and been a part of myself as a pastor. Um, so one of the biggest challenges these days for small churches is the number of required policies in the Book of Order. The Book of Order requires about four different policies, anti-racism, harassment, child, youth, and vulnerable adult protection, and sexual misconduct. Um, and a church of 45 members, or even 145 members, is not going to have the capacity to do a ton of policy writing or even policy adapting. People call me all the time and like, don't you have a policy I can just use and put, like fill in the blank, church, insert church name here. I said, no, because it's not going to really work for you. Um, and what is having a policy if it's not something you can implement? If it calls for a committee structure that you just don't have because you've got 60 people to pick from and the 30 who are able to contribute time and energy to the life of the church are already very busy on session, uh, doing pastoral care, teaching Sunday school, all the things. They're at max, and you don't need to put them into policy writing mode if you don't have to. Um, so, and I think there's a fair question of whether small churches really need all the policies that are there. I can't tell you can't have them, but it's challenging. Like, what happens if you don't? Sometimes is a good question. Um, I will say, I think one of the things that is helpful to have, the Book of Order, kind of alongside the policies, requires a manual of operations for a church, and that can be a little bit of a challenge as well. But to have things written down about how you do things is really helpful. We had a I worked with a church that dissolved in my previous presbytery, and they took manual of operations seriously. I think they had a person maybe who was a technical writer in a previous life who was their clerk, and they had every chapter very carefully numbered. And but they took when they did the man and like 13.1, 13.2, all everything was very neatly outlined. But they also took the manual of operations part to be very serious of here's how to turn on the heat in the winter and to shift it over from air conditioning. And I tell you, it was wonderful. I had to go over and do it 1 year because there was nobody there. Like it was in town. We had keys. The building was basically empty. So I went over and I switched it all over and like followed every step. So it was literally a manual of operations. It was really helpful, but your church is probably not going to have it. However, you will wish you had it when your building and grounds chair is on vacation and and the heat doesn't work on a freezing Sunday morning. So to have, like as much of that kind of documentation work you can do, and it's not a book of order requirement, but it's a thing that will be helpful. Um, I've mentioned another sticking point in our polity already. Talked about rotation of terms. It's a challenge to identify new leaders in a shrinking congregation. Um, I I still read the annual reports from the congregation I served, and they just had their annual meeting and elected officers. And to their credit, they came to the congregational meeting, and the nominating committee said, "We just can't fill all the seats." And somehow there were three nominations from the floor that helped to didn't that helped get them there. So will those folks be willing and able to actually serve? We don't know. But it was a real gift to see them uh, trying to make their way through that. I've kind of alluded to this already. Another challenge of our polity is for small churches is the fact that our churches are businesses. We are required to be corporations in almost every state. There's paperwork that goes with that. there's just there's just a lot of responsibility that goes with that. The financial review process trips up so many of our churches on a regular basis. Um, there are some options. One nice little thing in the Book of Order that helps with financial review is you don't have to hire somebody to do that. You can have some people from the congregation who might be able to serve in that role. Um, and there are trainings available to help them. It's not a full audit, but to walk. The church I served had a group of like 6 or 8 folks who were trained to do it, and they took turns doing it year after year. And they would go in and tell the treasurer, "Okay, I'm looking at this here. Can you give me the receipt?" They'd pull out the bank statement. "Can you give me the receipt for check 1284?" And because I want to make sure that we have all the documentation for that. And so they would go through and pull the receipt and match it up, make sure that things were correct. They'd match the bank statements and all those sorts of things. It was a really good process, and uh, it was a good way for those folks to learn more about the life of the church. Another big challenge, and I'll say especially for folks in Florida and anywhere on a coast, is that our polity does require our churches to have insurance. And I'm seeing nods from the Florida folks because we know that this is a real challenge. Um, and there's just no way around it in the current mindset. I will say it is so important to have at least some minimal property and liability insurance. Liability insurance is super important as well. In some ways, you can lose your building, but you need to make sure your corporate entity stays, um, because you can do a lot of things differently. But you can't, it's difficult to recreate it, or if you become the subject of a lawsuit for some reason, for a liability purpose, you need that coverage. And I think there are two other pieces that are around the edges of our polity that get in the way these days for small churches. One of them is the expectations of professional ministry. The mindset that you need a Master of Divinity degree to pastor a congregation, because with that level of education, that when we require that, it means that they expect a certain type of compensation for their work, or for our work and this mindset that we want to find the right pastor um, reflects and that we do that with great care for good reason. It reflects a commitment to doing this well that just isn't always easy. It's not easy to find folks who will step into pastoral roles in smaller congregations, especially in smaller communities. So uh, it is, and it's kind of it's not our polity that's the problem there directly, but our expectations of our ministers are a part of our polity. And so to not name that as a place where we get stuck from time to time is unfortunate. And the last big thing that gets in the way, and I think this is probably the biggest, is like what we remember, our memory, our perception of the past. Um, we remember the way that we have done it before, and we think that that's still the way it should be done now. Then I still get phone calls from folks who expect me to give them a quote from the Book of Order that was removed when the so-called new form of government was put in place 15 years ago. 15 years old is not new. Um, you know, about 10 years ago, I started calling it the no longer new form of government, and it's really now not the new form of government. Um, but I still get people thinking back even further, where I think there was a version of the Book of Church Order in the Southern Church that basically did not include any mention of Robert's rules because it had all of the basics for running a meeting in it. It talked about how you did a meeting and said who could run the meeting and gave all sorts of extra permissions about, like when the pastor's terms of call are being considered, the clerk of session can preside. And so I know churches that do that. That's not in the Book of Order anywhere now. It used to be maybe, but it isn't now. Um, and but even more problematically, there is a mindset among a lot of our churches, and unfortunately uh, among among folks who serve in presbytery levels. I don't think it's necessarily most of the staff at presbytery are pretty open-minded about this. But there's a mindset that because we couldn't use we used to have a restriction on this, we still can't. We still can't do it because it was never allowed before, even though the rules are different now. So we can change the rules, but we can't change what we do. And that mindset is probably what I run into the most as the problem with our polity in working with small churches. Um, but that's not everywhere. I'm really grateful that I get to serve in places where that mindset there is a lot of freedom granted. And I hope your presbytery is in that mindset as well, because it really is. There's so much of that is concentrated in the way that the presbytery thinks through how it supports congregations and how it walks alongside them, whether it is a permission-giving culture or a restrictive culture. And that's not a point of polity. That's a point of culture. So those are my sticking points. I've got a few more thoughts that I'll share in a minute, but before I do, any questions on those? Any places you've struggled with the polity? Maybe I can help you find a way out of them. Joyce.
This isn't really a polity question, I don't think. Have you seen situations in a small church where rather than having a session of elders and a board of deacons, you have elder slash deacon, the same,
Hmm.
and
I
how,
have I
okay,
have
how does that work?
I have seen that. That is actually the model of the Reformed Church. So the Reformed Church in America, the RCA, uses that model. They call it the consistory, and they will it is the church board that is a mix of elders and deacons who make decisions together. Um, what you're describing is not explicitly permitted in the polity. I would say in Presbyterian polity, PCUSA polity, let me put it like that. Um, I would say that it is probably it would have to be very carefully constructed to fit within Presbyterian structures. I think it could happen, but I would want to work with the church very carefully to make sure that they understood how it really is supposed to happen. Because technically in our system, the elders are the ones who have to make the decisions.
Mhm. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it can be an interesting approach. It's I've served in the northern in churches that were previously in the northern stream and then I'm serving in a presbytery that's almost all southern stream churches. And I remember growing up because I grew up in Mississippi, in a church in an old PCUS church, and the mindset there was there were two things that happened. Number one, deacons were a stepping stone to elders. Number two, the deacons were the property committee. They didn't carry that care of the people that is really the core of the deacon role
Hmm.
today. Um, and so I would want to, in a church that wants to merge those two into a single entity and like keep them distinct in office, but have them work together in leadership, I'd want to probe a little bit to say, okay, what's behind that?
Okay.
Um, what do you understand deacon to be? What do you understand elder to be? And why are the deacons not totally comfortable with that? I will say that's the one place where I've seen that is in a more in a Korean in the PCUSA or kind of PCUSA adjacent is Korean churches will do some things kind of like that from time to time. And there's something we can learn from that.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions, comments on things that are sticky in our polity?
Andy, can you please tell whether our polity makes it compulsory that when a pastor leaves, before the church hires another pastor, there has to be an interim pastor. So is it mandatory?
It is not mandatory. I mean, presbyteries could require that. So that would be a presbytery by presbytery decision. The key line is G2O is in G208, where when a congregation has a vacancy in a pastoral position, or after the presbytery approves the effective date of dissolution of the existing pastoral relationship, the congregation shall, with the guidance and permission of the presbytery, proceed to fill the vacancy in the following manner. And the only thing that follows there is like electing a nominating committee. So a presbytery could say, we're not going to let you elect a pastor nominating committee until you have an interim. And that's probably the way that that functions. But it's not like, so that would be how they would require it. But it is not in the book of order. It would be a local decision.
Thank you.
And I think I will say, you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to tell you my opinion on it anyway. I've gotten in trouble for saying what I think in moments like this before, but I will take the opportunity to say I think that that mindset of we've got to have an interim can really break small churches. Every pastoral transition puts a small church at risk. And and an interim pastor is still a transition to an interim pastor is still a pastoral transition. The church I served as pastor, for a lot of reasons, took a year and a half after I left. At the last session meeting where I was moderating and before I left, we approved a job description for the interim pastor, um, so they could start looking. For a variety of reasons, it took them a year and a half to find someone. That person served 3 years. Then it took them another year or so to actually call their next pastor, who was there about a year and then left. So, what is that? One, two, three. Out from me into the interim, out from the interim, into the new installed, out from the new installed, another interim, into another interim, out of another interim. into an installed relationship. That's 8 ins and outs in less than 10 years.
Do you think that was a problem with the congregation?
Um, I have to be very careful to say what I think on that, but it is a systemic problem working with small churches. The congregation didn't have the congregation had some issues. I'm aware of
Hmm.
them. The
Right.
presbytery also had some issues in how they supported them. So I think I can say that.
Okay.
And I wonder if that's the question, Andy, is how do we support the leadership in small congregations?
Hmm.
Because with that kind of transition, I mean, all those that you enumerated, there's somebody in that congregation who was there all the way through all of those things. So
Hmm.
how are they the stability? How is the church membership the
Yeah.
stability? And the church elders the stability even as you're having that, and that's a lot of burden to put
Hmm.
on lay folk. But for them to take that ownership, and know that,
Hmm.
also makes them more, I think it makes a church more attractive to somebody who wants to come in when they
Right.
know that there's just a steady thing going on and they can come in and lend a hand to
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Mhm.
And I'm that church is deeply gifted with some really amazing key leaders. They've had a clerk of session who's she's been serving as clerk for most of the last 35 years. Um, but she's not like she's she started in her 20s kind of thing. She barely had joined the church and then she was elected to session and then like 6 months after she joined the church she was put on session. 6 months later she became clerk and she's gotten some breaks but not extended ones. So, she might take a couple months off and then I think a couple years ago she took a whole year off, which was really good and healthy. But those are the kinds of, and I think that's another great thing in our polity. We can have that consistency of leadership in some way. There are spaces where people like clerks of session, like committee leaders, can be continuing presences even as they pull back briefly for a moment of a season to get that recharge. And that recharge is the most important piece. How do you make sure that folks don't get burned out inappropriately?
Mhm.
Anything else on that gets in the way? So I want to try to draw a few things to a close. I want to offer a few reflections, first of all, on why I mean, hopefully can support my initial hypothesis, if you will, that I think Presbyterian polity is actually really good for small churches in this day and age. First of all, there's not a lot that's actually required of our churches. There, there are some requirements, but they are not as extensive as most people would imagine. You got to have minutes, you got to have a corporation, you got to have insurance, you got to have a session, you got to have some leadership, but you don't even have to have a pastor. Um, like there are plenty of churches that would never, in other denominations, who would never be allowed to survive without consistent pastoral leadership and they do just fine. They don't just survive in the PCUSA, they thrive in our system. So there's just a lot of flexibility in there, and that flexibility applies at the session level and the presbytery level. Um, pre Sessions can use our polity to make it work for them, and presbyteries have a lot of space to create structures that can give permission for small churches to be their best selves and to work with the people they have to do their ministry and mission in their communities. And I think that's really because at our core, our polity is not about a long list of rules, but it's built with that just kind of stand alone because we like rules. Our rules follow from our theology. Our polity is built on our core principles of Presbyterian governance, which are about our Reformed theology, that We are better when we are together. We make decisions best, not alone, but in groups. And we think and we pray and we do and we take our time because we do better when we do that. I think that my favorite part of the Book of Order is the back in the foundations section. It's the third chapter of the foundation. Actually, like the whole foundations, the F section. But that third chapter, the principles of Presbyterian order and government, it's just a real gift to think through. But because those principles have guided churches of so many different sizes over the last 200 and almost 40 years now, to to help us see different ways that we can be church together that are still faithful, and that are very contextual for our life together. And so the challenge is to start to imagine something different, and to fertilize our imaginations in some way. So, my question here is, how do we build capacity for imagining something different to get over those old perceptions that tend to get in our way, um, and get us through those sticking points? Because, do we really need to amend the Book of Order a ton? Not really. It's there. So, but some ideas that I had, just think about the biblical stories of dreamers. There are so many different places in the Bible we hear about people seeing something different in dreams. I just my quick thinking on that was, we hear Jacob and Joseph, Joseph in the Old Testament, uh, Mary, and then Joseph, the father of Jesus. All the ways in which dreams played into that. Not to mention the prophet Joel, talking about dreaming dreams there. I think we also can help people think through and open themselves to imagining something different by reminding one another that we have, uh, vowed to serve with energy, intelligence, imagination, and love, and to keep that imagination in there and to use that well alongside things. I think we have to tell good stories about things that work in our polity as well. That helps us to imagine ourselves to be in a different place. So just to tell the stories of the commissioned ruling elders who are doing amazing transformative ministry in their congregations that they serve, to think about that temporary pastor who went to a church for 3 months and ended up staying for 13 years, kinds of things. Those stories matter. I think we need to think more carefully about the principles that lie behind our rules. So to make sure that when we say, okay, we're going to not let, well, we're going to make sure that every pastor has benefits. Okay, great. What's the principle behind that? Because there might be ways to make that happen that don't involve full benefits from the Board of Pensions and installed pastoral relationships. Are there ways we can make sure that people have what is behind our principle, behind our rules, that open us to something different? And I think just each and every day in all of our lives, but especially in the church, look for a way to say yes when we're asked to do something new or different. I was talking with a state clerk colleague the other day, and he was describing how, his goal is to always get to and to do everything he can to get to a yes when asked a question. And I think that's a really good answer.
I
Um,
like that.
to recognize that, but to always remember sometimes a no is a good answer. That will help the church shift and grow too. But yes and no are both faithful. Yet, are there ways for our faithfulness to deepen so that we can imagine church in a different way for a different era? So, um, those are those are the thoughts I have. I'm happy to answer any other questions you have. I will definitely type up my notes in a way that I can share them, especially to kind of point you to some of the Book of Order references that might help you implement this if you have questions.
Oh, Philip was trying to find the clapping.
Oh, well, thank you.
We'll go old school.
That's okay. I'll take the old school. That's fine. Well,
Thank
thank you so much for the invitation. It was fun to think about this and try to put something in a little bit different mindset for me. As I said, I deal a lot with, you know, I deal a lot with larger churches and associate pastors and those sorts of things. So it's nice to get back to my roots of the small church because that's really my roots. And there's a good part of my love for the church that is really rooted in. I didn't grow up in a small church, but I very much kind of found my call and in a totally new and different way by
you.
working in a smaller setting. And so it's a gift to come back to that.
Well, Andy, I really appreciate what you offered. You offered many, many good things, but as by way of some of the solutions is tell those stories,
Hmm.
and I think that's one of the things we can do in Small and Mighty is to come here and tell the stories, and then make sure that our stories get
Hmm.
out to encourage others as well. Joyce.
Yes, last thing, Andy, do you have anything in writing from your training of members to do financial reviews? Three of us are in
Oh.
process right now of doing what we think is right, but it would be nice to to be, assured
Let
that maybe it
me
is kind of right.
let me see what I can find. I don't have the Um, I don't have my own, I don't have what that group was trained on. That was a good while back. I
Uh-huh.
do know I still have a connection to the guy who did the training, and I don't know if he's still doing the training. I might be able to get the notes from him, but I do think we have some stuff that we on our Presbytery website we've put together over the years from one of our churches. So I'll see what I can find and I'll send it your way.
I'd very much
Uh,
appreciate it.
because I know how to find you, Joyce. So
Okay, great.
you're
So
in my email.
Andy, this did come up in my church just recently too, because we have not done financial reviews that I thought were what we needed to be doing, and the session kind of felt like if they have been every month receiving a report from the financial from our treasurer, and they review it, and we do have a system for them to review kind of their own committee's expenses and things like that. And then they approve the report every month, the
Mm.
financial report every month. They felt like that was sufficient. And then they re approved the annual report, but nobody's going through and looking at those receipts and all of that.
Yeah, the
You
Book
would
of
say
Order,
no.
the Book of Order has it doesn't say much about that content about how that has to be done. The minimum standards are at G30113. Um,
Okay.
it is it's specific to say a full financial review of all financial books and records shall be conducted every year by a
Okay.
public accountant or committee of members versed in accounting procedures. So I've been asked that question before, and I don't think that is the intent of that requirement.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That it
We will we
it's
will
not
circle
forever. I
back on
mean,
that.
yeah, I mean, keep growing on, sometimes we just have to keep growing our understanding and training. But I'll when I find those materials, I'll send them to you because I think they can be really helpful in terms
Sure.
of it's not as difficult. You don't have to hire a CPA and spend 40,000. I mean, I've known churches to spend, I've known churches with a $200,000 budget to spend $40,000 on an audit. Um, that's ridiculous.
No, yeah, let's not do that. Okay. Well, we're
Yeah.
going to let you go, but
Okay.
next month our work will be to come and we're going to do two things. We're going to tell a story from our church, a ways that we've kind of maybe taken a road less traveled, and it's worked well, or it's been challenging. Um, and then also bring some of the challenges that you have, and that conversation will help us build our next offerings for the coming season. So, how's that sound? All
Sounds
right,
good.
great. We'll look forward to seeing y'all then, and please look for the follow up with Andy's resources and the recording.
Very good. Thank you all. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good
God be
night.
with you.